So I'm really excited to introduce you to a longtime friend and client of mine, Michael Medaglia, who I have been a fan of him personally for many, many years. So I'm excited to introduce him to you because I'm doing a special piece about passion to purpose. And when I was thinking about who to interview for this, I thought, oh, I know exactly who. I'd love to get a chance to interview Michael. Now, Michael and I are in different states, so we're doing this somewhat remotely, but fortunately, because of technology, we're able to come together. So welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Winnie. It's great to be here.
I know it's been too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're actually in different cities, but you have just done so much in your life that I was hoping that you might share with us kind of your journey from, the early days. I think when I was speaking with you initially, you were still at Caltech, were you not?
Yeah, that's right. And that was ancient history at this point. But yeah, we got to know each other a long time ago. While I was straight out of college, and I remember you told me then this is the time to start thinking about your financial future, and I'm glad you enforced that upon me.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I couldn't have done it without you. You are probably the 90% of the work was all on you. And in fact, I mean, you really were already very successful as an academic. I mean, you went to Caltech, which is obviously not a small feat at all. And you were already successful there. And I know you, early on in your career, you had worked at technology companies, right? And a lot of people looking at you now and seeing your film credits and seeing what you've done to date will say like, wow, I really want to accomplish what Michael has accomplished. But maybe you could share with us a little bit about your journey, how you got from, the early days of Pasadena in school to where you are today.
I originally went to school to study engineering, and that's what I did at Caltech. But even when I first started doing that, I kind of felt like I wanted to be involved in something more creative, something more artistic. And at the time, since Caltech was such a science-oriented school, they had an agreement with an art school, so the nerds could take some art classes and the artists could take some science classes and math, and that's what I did. I took a film class, just to see if it was something I wanted to do. I didn't really know anything about filmmaking, so we made a couple of films, and I made some. I remember I made some really bad films. I remember the look on my teacher's face when he first saw my film. It was just, he just didn't know what to say. But I loved it. I realized like, wow, this is so much fun. I want to do this more. And since that point on, and this was my freshman year, I kind of tried to make it work. I kept taking more film classes, and but I finished Caltech at the same time. Having a very practical father and mother, they said, you have to finish this engineering degree, and I'm glad they did, because it's really hard to support yourself as a filmmaker, but I'm glad I was able to continue working in the technology. And fast forwarding, I don't know what, 20 years later, now film and technology is almost completely merged. So it was, I guess it was a good thing that I listened to my parents. So listen to your parents, everyone.
And you were visionary in that your approach, because you studied at one of the finest universities in the country, and I'm sure the folks at Caltech would have never imagined that one of their finest would go into filmmaking. But it's what you've built is something really remarkable, and I love to share that story, because a lot of times we feel like you can do one of two things. You can either stay a very traditional practical route, or you can take the life of a creative, and you've been able to accomplish both in your own way, and it's been complementary, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, there's always ups and downs. But yeah, they in fact, yeah, they have been complementary. There are skills that I got from one, from one, uh, you know, from the art world that traveled through to my technology career and vice versa. There's a lot of similarities. And just to give like a brief example, a making a film from beginning to end, raising money, and so forth, is not too different from a startup company. There's a lot of leadership similarities. There's a lot of team building similarities, fundraising similarities, and so having both backgrounds is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've taken a very practical approach because you did, graduating from Caltech, you did actually work at technology companies. And that helped give you some resources to work on your passion, which is filmmaking, correct?
Yeah. I mean, planning projects, leading small teams and some larger teams, and also just monetary resources is helpful too. Having a stable income is sometimes one of the most important things when it comes to cultivating creativity. If you're just struggling to make ends meet, sometimes it's hard to stay creative. I shouldn't say it's not hard to stay creative, but you run the risk of burning out, and I see that happen to a lot of creatives. It's a common problem.
No, I think it's a really good point because you've made a good point. It's like anything else, right? When you have struggle or stress, whether it be financial or whatnot, I mean, it does affect your productivity because you're not at your best. You don't feel at your best. And so I think your lesson is a valuable one of you had the stability of a tech job, right? Or a more traditional job, and probably some of the employee benefits and things like that, so that you could then be at your best when you started making films, right? Your creative spirit. So I think that's very, it's not unique, but it's very important that we should recognize, because not everyone just becomes an overnight success. I heard someone say that an overnight success is usually someone who's been successful after 4 years. And
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was just watching the Beatles documentary, the one that's released now 8 days a week, and they are known for being overnight successes, but in the documentary you learn that they were playing for years and years and years. Like I think it was 5 or 6 years before they ever became even well known in Liverpool or outside of Liverpool. So I think that the notion of an overnight success is a publicity term, really.
Right, absolutely. And let's talk about give everybody an idea of some of the projects that you're working on today. I mean, because it's been a journey for sure, but you now have certainly tasted success. So let's talk about that.
Well, I made some smaller films, some music videos, a couple of small commercials, and then a short film which did pretty well in festivals. And then I tried to build the projects into something bigger. And most recently, I wrote and directed a feature film called Deep Dark, and
it did very well.
I'm sorry?
Which did very, very well.
Yeah, got some festival awards. It's in distribution now. It's on currently on an Amazon Prime and iTunes and Xbox, and it got I would say mixed reviews. Some people hate it, and they're very vocal about it online, and other people wrote it was one of my top 15 films of the year.
Wow.
So it polarizes people, but But you know, getting some best director, best actor, best film. I got a couple of awards like that in different festivals around the world. So that's always nice.
It's very nice. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment. Something that you should be proud of.
Yeah, I am, and you know, that's always great. You know, having those accomplishments, but at the same time, I feel like even if that wasn't happening, I probably would be doing it anyway. I feel like for me, it's so I just I like to make films, and so that is the reward for me, and I think that's important if you're a filmmaker, because often it's such a long, hard road. Those rewards are few and far between, and so if you don't like the process of making a film, you're just you know, you're not gonna want to keep doing it. And so I'm sure this is the case with any, you know, big project, large undertaking. You really have to not just want to, you know, have the end goal in mind, but the journey has to be rewarding as well. So
do you enjoy the journey?
Yeah, I mean, not every day, but you know, there's always some part of it that I enjoy. Like right now, I'm writing a new screenplay, and I hate writing. It's a slog for me, but you know, every now and then there's a, you know, jolt of inspiration, or you come up with something really interesting, or you get past a hump, and it's a great thing. You know, and this is with film, as in with probably other things, it's a long journey of small steps, one after another.
Right. Well, I mean, like anything else, and that's another thing. I know you have an engineering background, and you're certainly a creative now, but you talked a little bit earlier about how making films is a lot like building a startup, right? And where you have to raise money and whatnot. So do you do that yourself? Is that something that someone helps you with? How do you do something like that that's not in your typical, like that's not something that everybody just excels at? Not everybody's good at fundraising. Are you?
I think I'm so and learning. I think it's probably one of the hardest things about filmmaking. You know, you hear of very, very well-known filmmakers who have trouble finding their films. Orson Welles, towards the end of his career, couldn't get his films made. But it's always great to have help, and I always try to get help, someone that's better at it than I am, and that's something I think is a part of it too. You have to recognize your strengths and weaknesses. I do some of the fundraising myself, and that's probably the best way to do it, because you know, as an artist or as a filmmaker, most people are supporting you. They're supporting you or your idea, or the team that you've created. And so you know, maybe the actor that they are supporting, or it's you, the director, or could be the idea. But I would say more often than not, an idea alone is not going to get people to support you. It has to be you either championing the idea, or just really explaining why it's, you know, such a important thing to fundraise for. I think that's what it comes down to, and that's something that I think is, you know, filmmaking or startup funding or anything. I think being able to explain your idea and win people over with it is a key part of the process.
So how do you go about fundraising? I'm curious. Is it
for films?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like every single film has its own story, but for it depends on the budget. Different budgets will require different types of strategies, but for very, very, very small films, you can you can self-finance. I mean, talking, short films or things like that. For bigger films, you can do things like Kickstarter, which we all know about, Indiegogo, etc. There's also, once you start to get into the bigger films, like maybe $50,000 or $100,000, you can often leverage state funding. So they give you rebates or tax deductions for that. They know that films create a lot of jobs in industry in the state, so they want to bring that work into their state. So we did some of that on Deep Dark. There's private equity, which is, knocking down doors and looking for investors. I think that's more or less what an angel investor is in the startup world. It's kind of like that. When you get to even bigger films, then you can get the word is it's escaping me. You get basically advances from, or you get promises of funding from sales agents, and you take those promises to a bank who will then loan you money based on that. And then you can use that to make the film. I'm just blipping on the name for that right now, but that's a common way to get
funding.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know, so a part of your journey was moving out of state, because a lot of people think, well, if you're a filmmaker, you kind of need to be either in New York and LA. But you actually moved out of California. Can you talk about that? How was that decision made?
That was almost entirely my wife's decision. She wanted to get out of LA, and her company had an office in Portland. So she's like, Michael, I really want to move. This place is driving me crazy. And neither of us was originally from there. We are both from the East Coast, different states. But myself, since a lot of my business is telecommuting, a lot of the clients were from other states and countries anyway. It really wasn't very hard for me to move. So we just picked up, we moved, and honestly, being in Portland, I think for me made it easier to make Deep Dark the feature, just because it's a smaller film community, and I think people were a little more receptive here for that, for making a film. And that's not to say that you couldn't do this in LA either. There's advantages to making films in LA as well. Mostly it's that the actors all live there. But I think for me at the time, it was sort of a shot in the arm. And the other nice thing was the story I wrote happened to take place in a smaller city. It's about an artist too, so Portland was the kind of perfect place for it. And so it just it happened like kismet.
It was a perfect fit. So, initially when you first started making films, how much of your time, like percentage-wise, how much did you have to do your consulting or technology work or engineering work, and how much time were you able to devote to making films, and how is that different today?
Well, the nice thing about being your own boss, I was an independent contractor at the time, and now I've grown that into a small company. But the nice thing about having that control is you can make the time when you want, or if you have a long run of work, and you're going to be slow for a while, you can sort of prime yourself. Okay, I'm gonna as soon as this job ends, I'm going to focus on filmmaking next. And that's a lot of what I did. I would save money while I was working on contract gigs, and then take some time off and work on a film. but often I would do the both at the same time, work on films at night and do software development during the day. There's no formula for it, I think. But nowadays, well, I'm married, so with my wife we have more of a stable income. So I guess I have more flexibility now, and also now that I have the small company, there's actually more flexibility in that as well. We work on slightly bigger jobs, and usually there's someone working on something at any given time. So it's less feast or famine. It's more big meals and small meals.
Oh, that's great. That's great, Mike. So do you feel like that having that balance your journey of having that software development company, do you feel like it slowed you down, or did it speed you up in terms of being able to make films?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if there's any way to answer that. If I had gotten some kind of great big break early on, it may have. You might say that's software development might have slowed me down. But there's just no way of knowing one way or the other. So I certainly have friends that left the film industry to pursue more steady income. Many people I went to film school with, are no longer doing it. And that's not to say that they're not onto something they like better. Who knows? But I think being a software developer has given me the ability to continue pursuing it, and also, I think this is important. A lot of people I know that work in the film industry, maybe they're not doing what they originally wanted to. Maybe they're not directing or writing or whatever. But if they have a job in that industry, they get burnt out on it, and they don't want to be creative after that. They come home from work and they're just, they just want to have a beer or watch TV. And I've noticed that kind of burnout effect on several people. So when you're working in something entirely different, you're having that. It's fresh and new for you when you switch modes into something creative, and so I love that. That's such a great feeling to me.
Oh, I love that point. That's actually so interesting and profound, because you essentially are, because usually you think engineers aren't creative, but you're actually in both worlds, and both worlds you're doing well by our own definition. I mean, you are self-sustaining, you don't have to worry paycheck to paycheck. So in many ways, you have been successful in two different, not genres, but two different industries, right? So I think that's a great lesson for other young people who looked at you and aspire to be a filmmaker, because you've done it in a very smart way. You've done it so that you're creative, but in a very practical sense, right? You have a wife, and you're self-sustaining, right?
Yeah. I wish I could say that I had planned this whole thing from the beginning, but I think it was just a sequence of steps that ended up here. But I think to other potential filmmakers or whatever creative pursuits, it doesn't hurt to have a fallback gig that can help support you with what you're doing. And I actually know a lot of filmmakers that do this. It may not be software development. I was just reading an article on about one filmmaker who writes cookbooks. So he I don't know if he writes them himself, but he produces them. He takes the photos, does the page layout, and that's what he does. And then when he can, he'll make another film. So the notion of a hyphenated filmmaker is, I think in the past, if you were to say, oh, I'm a filmmaker / mechanic, people would look down upon that. Whereas now I think 95% of the filmmakers out there have a hyphenated job. and that is okay. Don't feel like that is, something you should be ashamed of. I wish I could have told me 15 or 20 years ago that.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you're sharing that with us now. I think that's something that a lot of people need to hear. Like, it's not something to be embarrassed about. Everybody has their own personal journey, and nobody has a smooth journey, right? Nobody has a perfect journey. And if they do, I haven't met someone like that yet. Part of the beauty of the journey is experiencing how we got from point A to point B, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
So I know, Michael, this has been, to me, so profound and interesting, and I've known you for years, so I just have even more respect and admiration for you today. And
thank you, Winnie.
no, but I mean that sincerely. I guess how can we, I mean, what do you look forward to next? I mean, what's your ideal future? What would you like to accomplish?
Well, I'd love to make the next feature, the one that I'm writing now. It's a sci-fi horror film, and there's actually a couple of projects that I want my company Vitamin M to work on. That is sort of a combination of film and software development. I haven't fully formed it yet, but I think it's going to be more in the educational and potentially an alternate reality type project, and probably going to be something small that we hopefully we get a grant for, but it's the type of thing where I still need to see how much interest there is out there, but it's something that I think we would be good at and would be an interesting thing, and something that I've been I guess drawn to more lately is not just working on projects that either will be very successful monetarily or or be. I'd like to work on more projects that are just beneficial to either to people as in general, or to help educate a little bit. And so that's something I have wanted to do for a while. So hopefully that's going to be the next project. And it should be fun too. So it's kind of edutainment.
Edutainment. That's interesting. So sci-fi, horror, and edutainment. I love that.
Yeah.
You're all about contrast.
I guess so. Yeah.
And so how can we follow this journey? I know how I'm able to reach you, but for those that are listening and watching you today, how can they follow your journey and kind of just participate and follow your next projects with you?
Probably the best way is on Twitter. My username is just my last name. And you can put it in the the meta information of the podcast, if you're interested in horror movies and you want to see Deep Dark, by all means go and watch it on Amazon or iTunes or.
It's really good. I've seen it. I'm going to see it again now that I know it's on Amazon.
And by the way, if there's any any filmmaker or any one that has a question about something that we covered today, I'm happy to, talk about it. Find me on Twitter, or if you don't use Twitter, you can, if you go to prettypictures.com, that has some of my films and my email address, so you could always email me. But yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and then also you can always reach me, and I can always get you in touch with Michael too. So you can definitely follow our journey and learn more from him. But absolutely, I think there's just so much to be learned from this journey. And I've been watching from the sidelines for so many years now, but I think it's a good one, especially now that we're talking to millennials and younger people who want to follow passion and purpose. Why not learn from some of the best who've lived it and who experienced it, the ups and the downs? Yeah. So thank you, Michael. So amazing, so incredible to talk with you. And most important, thank you for your time.
Oh, you too, Winnie. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be on this podcast.
Thank you. And then we'll definitely circle back with you, but we'll talk to you next time, and thank you for everybody who tuned in.
Okay, thanks everyone.